Last year, I did a review on the Megaman X series, and while I'm fairly satisfied with all the things I said about the games included, I still felt like there's something I didn't talk about enough. Something that's of signature of the series. The fact that I left such a thing behind made me feel... Maverick. Sorry, that was a crappy segue. Where the original Megaman has robot masters, Megaman X has the advanced version of those rogues in the form of beastly Mavericks. What makes these guys as reputable as they are comes down to their complex designs, battle styles, and general command of threat against X and his comrades. And today, we're gonna be looking at the best and worst Mavericks of each of these titles. May I help you?
Oh, don't mind me, I just thought I've seen this somewhere before.
Oh come on, I did not steal this format from anyone!
I didn't say anything about the format. But now you mention it, it kinda does look like...
Alright, please don't kill me. So to measure up the worthiness of these villains, we're gonna look at certain notable factors. Their stage design, which plays a big part in developing their presence, how well they fare as bosses, creativity and challenge being major drawing points, the look and feel of the Mavericks and their stage, how good their weapons are, and if they got anything else of substance to show as characters. Of course, I'm only gonna include Mavericks from the main series titles, just to make things a little easy. There won't be anything from spin-offs like Command Mission or non-canon sources like Extreme. Keep in mind also that all of this will come down to my opinion on what makes the Maverick better or worse than the other. I'll try to be as objective with my reasons as I can, but don't be surprised if you find something to disagree with. Now with all that made clear, let's stack up the sub-tanks and get fueling. Time to rank the best and worst the Mavericks have to offer. If we're looking at the first game, it's easy to say that most of the Mavericks are pretty good at what they're set to do. But when it comes to picking the best, I think everyone can agree on who deserves the title the most. All you gotta do is look up the sky, and behold the majestic fucking eagle! Storm Eagle is pretty much the most popular Maverick from X1, and for good reason. He is the slickest and most badass one of the bunch. His stage is what you'd expect from the one who commands the sky. An airport filled to the brim with conveyor platforms, turrets, and flamethrowers. It's a pretty standard stage that's not especially difficult. Hell, if they just had a metal detector, their problems would have been solved instantly. But then you won't get to listen to that kick-ass stage music while blazing through now, would you? Getting to his boss fight, it's not much different from the stage. Eagle himself is not that hard to beat as most of his attacks mainly revolve around causing storms to push you off the stage. If you don't have the dash boots, this fight can be tricky to win. Otherwise, he's simple, with or without his weakness. But fret not, what he lacks in challenge he makes up for with a pretty good background. Storm Eagle was once a loyal Reploid in service of the Maverick Hunters, and technically still is. He's actually not corrupted by the Sigma virus, yet he only serves Sigma because he's powerless to go against the Madman. He fights you not of pleasure, but reluctance. Might explain why the fight wasn't especially tough. On the bright side, his weapon, the Storm Tornado, is pretty much the best weapon in the game. It can tear down tons of enemies at a time and has the ammunition of Metal Blade to boot. But even without the great weapon, Storm Eagle still has more than enough to qualify as X1's best Maverick. After all, how can you not respect a Maverick who's doing his best to fulfill his duty? Duty. Okay, fine! I guess Newgrounds is right to call you that. Given the quality of X1, to see a particular Maverick as bad will be an acquired taste. I had my fair share of poor experiences with some of the lesser rogues, but none of it worse than Sting Chameleon. Now, like the rest of X1's roster, Chameleon does have a fair amount of good to talk about. For one, he has a pretty nice stage that makes decent use out of the right armors. You know, compared to Chill Penguin's stage at least. The cyber nature aesthetic is pretty enough, though the mini-boss guarding the hidden capsule is a little hitbox happy with his weak spot. What really sets a poor vibe to this Maverick though is his boss fight. True to his name, Chameleon is stingy. His barb and spike ceiling attacks hit really fast and give you little time to react and dodge. Not to mention, just trying to hit this guy is a pain because of how often he keeps camouflaging. The process takes a good while and he can even spam it if he wants to. It doesn't even make sense considering camouflaging makes one invisible, not invincible. Even Kirby got this right. If you value your sanity, you had better come fighting this boss with his weakness weapon. Sacrificing a gamer's pride is worth sparing the migraine with this guy. At least he does give you a really good weapon in return. Chameleon Sting, uncreative name aside, is basically a chargeless charge shot that fires 3 directions. I say it's a spoil worthy of putting up with the nuisance of this radical reptile. Still, will it kill him to stop hiding every 10 seconds? I'm all for Megaman bosses breaking the standard battle formula and trying something new. But still, you really gotta know how to not screw up unique ideas. It's very important that these experiences became something to remember in a pleasant light. Fortunately, Morphmoth got the job done. On the surface, this guy seems kinda bland. I mean, how are you gonna make a dumpster moth Maverick good, let alone stand out? Well, to start with, let's look at the stage. For a junkyard, there's quite a lot that goes on around here. Trash magnetizers manipulating gravity, fallen god reploids being resurrected, and trash golems being piloted by parasite bots. It's a pretty creative stage that makes great use out of what's essentially the reploid graveyard. The music is kinda bland, but then again X2 isn't always the best when it comes to soundtracks, so I'll let it slide. Besides, we still get a sweet boss fight to follow up. Morphmoth starts the battle cuddling in a bagworm. Okay, unusual. And strangely, he still manages to pose a threat by throwing a lot of tricky to dodge debris around the room. Should you manage to whittle him out, he eventually blossoms out of the cocoon and enters his moth phase. In this form, Morphmoth can sprinkle some devastating scale dust followed up by firing LSD lasers from his arms.
The colors!
He puts up a big fight, though he's only got a few HP left to spare by then. Still, it's really cool to see a multi-phase battle in one of the earlier X games, let alone one that's done with metamorphosis in mind. I suppose it's fair given what the Lepidopterans specialize in. It makes for a pretty good, moderately challenging fight too. His weapon, the Silk Shot, isn't all that spectacular as a combat weapon, but its utility as an item collector certainly makes sub-tank stalking a lot less of a chore, so it's worth thanking just for that. While some of the future X Mavericks have their own take on multi-phase battles, Morphmoth remains the one who handles it the best. I'm glad to draw this underrated Maverick to the light it's been chasing, because above all, he truly deserves the pleasure. You know, it takes a lot of effort to design a cool Maverick, and I do appreciate the time and thought put into a lot of these designs. Sadly, if everything built around it doesn't hold up, it really won't amount to much. Wheelgator pretty much fits into that category. There's a handful of X2 Mavericks that are lame in aspects correlated to design and general lack of challenge, but it's something else when an interesting Maverick just disappoints you. Let's start with the stage, and oh goodness gracious, what is that music? I can't make heads or tails what they're going for this composition other than it's techno and metal? It's a mess. Already that sours the entrance, but even past that, the stage is the same case. It's just a mess of a stage that sometimes has elevators and death spikes, and a right armor segment that lasts less than 15 seconds. It's like the stage just randomly decides what hazard it's gonna have whether it has a theme or not. I get this is a dinosaur tank, and yeah, some of the stuff does relate to it, but I think Slashman from Megaman 7 sets a better example when it comes to handling the 16-bit dinosaur motif. And no, Wheelgator himself doesn't do it justice either. His shtick is that he'll occasionally throw a piece of wheel sliding across the walls, and then he dives in for a long time, before he ambushes you and dives back in for an extra long time. This is like the Drillman fight from Megaman 4 if it's like 80% less fun. I don't see the thrill of clutching the wall for most of the fight while dodging easily avoidable wheels until Gator here pops in and becomes vulnerable for a short while. Even with his weakness weapon, the fight still takes forever to get done. Seriously, how do you screw up a Gator Maverick? His weapon is okay, I guess. Spin Wheel is helpful for finding some hidden items and is the weakness to a couple of strong enemies. But other than that, it's heavily outclassed by other far better offense and utility weapons in the game. Still, from a Maverick this tedious, I expect a payoff that actually makes all that wasted time worth it. Passable won't cut this guy the slack he doesn't earn. There's a certain vibe that I get from every Maverick roster in the series. X1's roster gives off the vibe of simple but colorful and effective adversaries. X4's gives off a strong vibrance showing how serious their Mavericks are. X5 has Guns N' Roses and stupid names. And as for X3, the feel I get from the roster is that there's second-hand shovelwares put in the front line due to the shortage of good Mavericks. No kidding, I'm just not feeling X3's roster. They bring forth some neat ideas but do next to nothing creative with them. So much so that even the best one feels pretty standard compared to some of the series' greatest. To his credit though, Volt Catfish did his job fine. He may be a bit silly looking, but I say that's better than being completely blank and dreary like most of the roster is. At least his stage actually has stuff going on in it. True to his lightning element, the enemies do attack with electric and plasma projectiles. The elevators, laser turrets, and broken circuits also make sense in the context that you're fighting this guy in a power plant. However, it's still not a very memorable stage, as there's no particularly creative way of handling electric hazards other than all the standard stuff. Still, we do get a decent boss fight in the end. Catfish starts up pretty easy as he merely jumps from one spot to another, shooting an occasional ball of volt towards you. His second phase is tricky if you don't know what to do, but it's not exactly luck-based. His weapon, the Triad Thunder, is also decently practical. It functions well as a semi-shield weapon that kills most enemies in an extended range. So overall, not a great Maverick, but I'll take someone who at least puts some muscle in his work where the others won't. Some people may look down on you, Volty, but I'll gladly welcome you as an honorary of X3. How often do you hear Mavericks being slammed as the worst because of how criminally annoying and frustrating they are? And yes, those are perfectly valid reasons to consider a Maverick among the worst. But what about a Maverick that's just boring? One that does literally nothing to stand out, yet still somehow culminates an experience of sheer unpleasantness. Mavericks like Blast Hornet. I don't hear many people talk about this Maverick. After playing through X3 again, I think I can see why. Out of all the Mavericks in the series, this one seems to have the least merit worth showing for. The only good thing I can say about Blast Hornet is his design. But then again, you've seen Will Gator, right? Good design won't save a Maverick if the rest doesn't hold up. Where to begin? His stage? What stage? For a military base, so much of it is literally filled with nothing. All the enemies you find here are hardly unique to this stage, as you'll find a buttload more of them in the other stages. But that's okay, because if the stage has some unique hazard in it, that should make up for, okay, who am I kidding? There's nothing here! Zilch! Zero! Nada! You know that one empty space in Crush Crawfish's stage that has no enemies or hazards in it for some reason? Well, just take that, stretch it 3 times longer, and that's all you need to build this effortless wasteland. The most you get out of this stage is a mini-boss that's essentially just the game's way to brag its wireframe physics, and slow-moving supply boxes that came the closest to being hazards for this stage. Seriously dude, Wire freaking Sponge has better stage gimmicks than you. Woo boy, we haven't even gotten into the boss fight. You think such a pointless stage will build up to a pathetic boss, but no. What we got here is the opposite, and not in a good way. Blast Hornet shoots a swarm of mines that serve to buffer your movement, all just so he can impale his stinger onto you. And because of X3's increased damage output from all sources, you bet that shit's gonna bite like hellfire. I guess that's why most of the bosses prefer to just ram all the time. Why try when all your power is put to one attack? His other attacks essentially has him track you down with his homing swarm mines that's also a pain in the ass to circumvent. In general, the attacks Hornet deploys don't give you much time to react, and the punishment for failing to dodge them is way too severe. So it's bad enough that his stage is a slogfest, the boss fight just had to be unpleasant and frustrating to boot. And his weapon might just be the worst one in the game. Parasite Bomb has very little practical use. It rarely hurts enemies, it doesn't blow up anything, and you'll only ever find use for it after the charge upgrade. Honestly, it's not even worth it when weapons like Spinning Blade can do the same job for less. Seriously, how does a Maverick called Blast Hornet, a killer insect fused with explosions, has nothing exciting going for him? You could have tried to make him an active threat across the stage by, oh, I don't know, fire a satellite laser at you like he did in the PS1 cutscene. Even if it doesn't fix everything, at least I'd actually remember it happened. Sure, you could still argue there are worse Mavericks out there, ones that have terrible designs and cheap stages, yet none of them fail as much at leaving an impression as this rejected private. When a junkyard moth manages to be the cooler insect, then you really gotta go back to the hive and train some more. Otherwise, you might as well just exist to be amphibian chowder. X-Force roster of Mavericks is undeniably the best in the series, so you can tell that picking one from the It's Magma Dragoon! There! Why do I even try? In a franchise where atrocious fire bosses are the norm, it's great to see that they also make out some of the best bosses in the series to balance it out. Dragoon immediately makes an impression as he assists the Hunter team during the destruction of the Sky Lagoon. Of course, you found out later that he's the one responsible for the chaos to begin with. And his reason for doing this? To have a fight to the death with the 2 heroic Maverick Hunters. You know, what is with supposed honorable fighters doing insane crap just to get something so simple? Ah well, who am I to judge? Dragoon's stage takes place in, where else? A volcano. It's nothing new even for this series, but it does manage to stand out by being one of the toughest of its kind, meteors flying everywhere, lava sprouts bursting through the ground, and taking the right armor across pits of lava. There's a decent lot of stuff that happens here that can be really difficult for newcomers who are not accustomed to the game's flow, and in a sense, it's a great way to keep them on their toes without vehemently punishing them, unlike that other fire Reploid. Blaze through all of that, and you get to face Dragoon himself. It's clear that developers had a lot of fun with this Maverick. After all, one that's processed many unsubtle Street Fighter references with his flamethrowers has to be the result of passionate favoritism. Even factoring that out, Dragoon complements the rest of his stage well, by also being a really tough, but also really fun boss. Both the weapons he gives the hunters essentially provides them with the vertical coverage they very much need, which is absolutely praiseworthy. Dragoon as a whole sets the ideal bar for how challenging axe games can get while still being fair with the learning curve. If more fire bosses can be like this guy, perhaps the series won't have caught wildfire too much too soon. Not gonna lie, X-Force Worst is still better than over half of what we get in X3 or X6. But that's not to say they still don't goof to the same degree as those games. I mean, look at this big guy. How often do you see large bulky ice bosses in Megaman games at this rate? And if you're hoping that Frost Walrus will deviate from what those guys tend to do, you're giving him too much credit. I will say this, his stage is a legitimately great stage. Much like Crystal Snail from X2, there's a lot of pristine use of ice hazards in this stage. Levels like these usually love to slip you around icy floors for no rhyme or reason. But here, the slippery floors actually play a part in sliding you around the stage at great speed. With all the platforms that emerge out of thin air around here, it almost feels like a Yoku stage with much less bullshit puzzle platforming. And if you look closely in the background, you can find the previous Ice Mavericks stiffly silenced in their graves. Damn, with how savage Walrus is being, that's gotta mean he's superior to them, right? Dream on, big boy. Seems like all the good stuff that came out of Frosty got poured down to his stage, because the same effort was not given to his boss fight. For most of the battle, Walrus just walks slowly from left to right and occasionally tries to slide over you. Seriously, what is with these bosses and moving back and forth being their main method of attack? We're not in X3 anymore, you gotta do better than this. But wait, he can shoot ice projectiles at you, so that's gotta account for something, right? Nah, not really. All of his ice projectiles are not only easy to dodge, but they can be broken with your standard charge shots and saber attacks. So even in that regard, the hunk of cold beef hardly poses a threat. His weapons, the Frost Tower and Hyoretsuzen, are okay weapons, but let's face it, you're only ever gonna use them as boss weaknesses over anything else. Seriously, can we not give the ice element big bosses who can't be creative to save their lives? Fire bosses got their reputation soiled enough. There's no need to drag ice bosses in the same light. Sorry Frosty, I wish I could be nicer to you, but I expect a guy who disrespected his own colleagues to pull more weight than this. X5 has a very strange case of mixing and matching. There are some cool Mavericks in the roster, but more often than not, the stages don't do them any justice. There are a few exceptions to this of course, Spiral Pegasus and Dark Necrobat being two of them. And that includes my favorite of the bunch, Spike Roserat. Plant-based Mavericks tend to be a mixed bag since they either thrive on being creative to compensate for how odd they appear, or just wilt down with every attempt they make to stand out. Thankfully, they did a great job with making Spike stand as a badass among his peers. As far as stage design goes, it's pretty clean and straightforward. A bramble-snared stage with vines you can climb on, mechanical plant enemies, and rows of spiky walls. Thankfully, these spikes don't cover up so much of the level that it's a chore to navigate. It's a well-built stage with booming jungle visuals and music serene to the ears. It also helps that it doesn't do anything stupid like some of the other X5 stages. Spike Roserat himself is quite the stylish boss. As he tap dances with every step, he fights by whipping you across the room with his barbed vine, tossing balls of spikes, and occasionally drops petals around to envelope the screen Woodman style. It was simple enough until he starts, butting, and covers both sides of the playing field with his whip-lashing antics. Playing as Zero, he can certainly be a challenge since you had to keep close to him, but it's much easier to keep your distance playing as X. His weapons, Spike Ball and Twin Dream, are a little lacking in practical use, but it does save you the trouble dealing with the final stage as well as cutting Titan Sigma down to size. As a whole, Roserat has a lot going for him when it comes to design and creativity of both his stage and boss fight. Of course, you could always be a cheap bastard and use the Falcon armor to break both of them, but if you insist on experiencing the pleasure of facing him, maybe tone the cheapskating a bit and perhaps make this guy the first Maverick you fight. Other than that, I can't really think of anything bad to say about the dazzling Roseman, barring all the standard issues that come with X5 as a whole, that is. Yes, Alia, I know how to climb. I have perfectly functioning arms! Sorry guys, it's just that, when I look at this Maverick, I can't help but to feel drowsy. I mean, what is there to talk about with Crescent Grizzly? Design? It's a bear with a big claw? Cool, I guess? His stage? A train. A boring old grey train. What's on it? Missiles, lasers, some death spikes. What was I saying again?
You're talking about Crescent Grizzly. Yep, just drop it here.
Okay, I know I should have been more serious, but come on, is there really much to talk about here? His design looks like a pachinko machine with a big red drill. And his stage is what /Beast's stage won't be if it thinks more damage output equals fun. It's not. It's dumb back then, and it still is. Even his boss fight is a landscape of bleh. His attacks can all be dodged if you just duck under the gaps in the floor. When he starts drilling through the stage, he's apparently not programmed with the reflex to swat a mosquito because you can still dodge his swipes without even trying. The only thing worth of note really is his spoils. The Crescent weapons are versatile enough that it finds use against enemy swarms of various orientations. But really, given how bland and unremarkable the Maverick was, I would have just thought the game gave me the weapon for free. Okay, to be fair, Grizzly isn't like Blast Hornet in that he's both boring and infuriating. He's just boring, that's it. I guess he could be worse, like having Volt Crack and stupid bike segment type of worse. But having no standout qualities is still asking to be shoved behind the rest. Imagine this guy doing Smokey's job. All the Fire Mavericks will be finding careers left and right. Well, a Maverick from X6. The game may have been fucking terrible! But I'm not gonna be that guy who pretends that it can't get some things right. So, the pick for this one is obviously gonna be Commander Yamark, right? After all, he's got a cute design, pretty decent stage, and a really helpful weapon. Actually, no. See, Yamark is great and I do love him, but he's a little standard and didn't achieve anything special other than not being completely atrocious. For the best of X6, we gotta go deeper. Once again, we dive into the trash. What? Oh boy, am I gonna piss off a lot of people with this choice. Metal Shark Player is often considered to be one of the worst of X6, but honestly, I don't think he deserves it. I mean, in the same game that gave us a senile scarab and a turtle that pees acid, I say Shark Player is at least worth a bit more than that. The main thing people take issue with him is his stage. It's a disposal center with a giant crusher looming over you across the area. Get crushed by that thing and you're as good as dead. Seems like a perfect setup for a disastrous stage, really. But there's a few things that made it kinda work. For one, apart from the crusher and maybe a few spiky walls, there isn't too much cryptic platforming involving bottomless pits and misplaced enemies. So the focus of the stage is attained mainly to the aforementioned central hazard. Second, though these hazards kill you instantly, there's a good number of generous checkpoints spread around the stage. X6 doesn't reset your progress no matter how many lives you lost, so you get to keep trying from the nearest checkpoint every time. So once you pass one rigorous segment, you're just about done with it. In a way, it's a good method to design rage levels that feels like you actually make progress as you go through it. Now compare this to Gate's disgusting torture lab, where the checkpoints are scarce so you'll be doing the same stupid shit way more than your sanity can take you. And hey, at least the music's pretty unique. Who'd figure you hear something so booming and patriotic in a disposal center of all places? Shark Player himself isn't a hard boss at all, but I'll give him credit for being really creative with what he can do. Aside from surfing through scraps and tossing anchors everywhere, he also specializes in necromancy, a comrade of the same art, I see. Yep, the guy can summon either a spirit of Sting Chameleon or Magnus Centipede after you as a desperation attack, hence being addressed originally as Metal Shark Prayer. His weapon, the Metal Anchor, is mildly functional on its own, but charging it up allows you to summon a flock of Storm Eagles after your enemies. Because why drop lasers and meteors if you can just drop entire Mavericks on them? I certainly would have preferred it if they move a portion of the stage's difficulty into the boss fight, but given the fact that there's at least some common sense that surrounds this Maverick, it's easier to appreciate what he specializes in. I'm not even kidding, the Rambling Christian Hammerhead might just be one of my top 3 favorite Mavericks. He swam out of the sludge that most X6 Mavericks plunder through, and came out a true player. Perhaps the name change does mean something after all. talking shit about X6? Didn't I do enough of that already? Nah, I don't think so. Honestly, anyone here, aside from the given exceptions, wholeheartedly deserve to be on the worst wing. But if one has to come out over the others, you can't do worse than Phoenix, PHNX. Wow, we're just rolling in with the awful Firebirds in this series, aren't we? Like, don't get me wrong, I love Firebirds, they're lovely, but this is not. Honestly, I don't even want to count PHNX as a fire-type Maverick sometimes. His stage doesn't even utilize fire as its primary hazard. Instead, what do we get? Giant avocado pretzels. 6 of them, in fact. All stupid, frustrating, and not fun to fight whatsoever. They take out the entire goddamn stage, and if you don't have the proper equipment to deal with them, you're not getting past even one. The other stages were stupid in a lot of spectacular ways, but this? The sheer lack of creativity for the sake of a cheap challenge is practically phenomenal. And you know what's sad? There's a small portion of the stage that has actual fire hazards and platforming. It was actually pretty okay, and had the stage made that its focus, I would have offered it some mercy, but nope. A glorified bakery is more important as stated by Master Chef PHNX. Speak of the feathery devil, his boss fight sure left a lot to be desired. He tries to shrink the fighting space with his Ribena jacuzzi, but what good does it do him really? His attacks are crazy easy to dodge and he doesn't put much effort in not getting ripped apart himself. Also, you know what this movement pattern looks like? The mini-boss from Split Mushroom stage in X4. So not only is he a ripoff, he's a glorified mini-boss. So we have pieces of food that don't qualify as a mini-boss, and an overcooked turkey who doesn't qualify as a boss. Is this really the clown you picked to be your professional Nightmare Hunter Gate? Stop making me yearn for Sigma, damn it! Given how bad all of this already is, I don't like to imagine how much worse it would have been if voice acting is involved.
Burn to the ground! Burn to the ground! Burn to the ground! Burn to the ground! What? He's gonna skip me. Might as well note something off by myself. Okay, maybe that was a bit much.
X8 gets really gimmicky with its Mavericks, and a lot of the time, it didn't really pay off. It's saying something when the stages that offer any sort of standard level design are the best ones the game can offer. That's not to say those can't be really good though, I mean, Gravity Antonian exists. Hell yeah, after sadly having to skip Yamark, I still managed to get another Bug Maverick on the best side. Antonian has a lot of good stuff going for him, as well as the sliver of the bad stuff. This mainly applies to the stage. True to his name, there's a lot of flipping and flopping in motion where he resides. There's some manipulation of platforms done with every flip of gravity you make, which includes how they hide certain secret rooms as well. It does have that annoying mini-boss room that will likely get you killed a lot though, so in that regard it's far from perfect. Getting to the fight itself, Antonian doesn't really give you a break with all the crushing blocks. He teleports blocks over you, generate black holes to alter gravity, and true to his ant biology, he'll casually lift the heavier blocks and toss them straight at you. Like the better bosses in X8, he stood well as a challenging boss that's not hooked in too heavily by a gimmick pitfall. Looking at you, Earthrock Trilobite. Also, can I just say that I love this guy's voice? He's like an old prat trying to sound like Doctor Who, and it's just fun to listen to his dialogue.
The problem here is the world we live in, but I plan to fix all that.
His weapon set for all 3 hunters complements him well. They all function as defense breakers that work especially well against enemies with shields and armors on. Antonian's just a good Maverick in general. Great design, decent stage, fun boss fight, and helpful weapons to boot. If more X8 Mavericks are as down to earth as he is, perhaps they won't have been stuck in gimmick hell as much as they do. I was not kidding when I say X8 tries too hard in all the wrong ways. They somehow managed to make shooter segments way more complicated than it needs to be. Case in point, Gigabolt Man-O-War. What's wrong with this guy, you may ask? Well, apart from being a complete wuss, he's also the culprit behind one of the most finicky stages I've ever seen in a Megaman game. The whole stage is a 3D shooter where you have to chase and gun down Gigabolt while flying across the sky. You pretty much have to keep close distance to make sure he takes maximum damage, which can be frustrating to do with the complete lack of depth perception and ridiculous obstacles coming from multiple angles. Oh yeah, and the speed power-ups you need to get close to him? Good luck getting those without purposely slamming yourself. So yeah, not a good start. How does the fight measure up? Pathetically. Man-Baby-O-War doesn't just act like a child, he fights like one too. He focuses on trying to ram you from different angles and occasionally fire jellyfish and sparks of electricity at you. It really doesn't take much effort to telegraph his pattern and predict where he moves to land a blow on him. Even when he's above you and keeping you in range with his electric arms, it makes him stay in place and free to get wailed on. His ultimate attack isn't much better. It's just streams of lightning with a predictable pattern that feels more like it's just there to pad time rather than posing an actual threat. Being based off one of the most dangerous sea creatures on Earth, I figure he'd at least, act like one. His weapons are barely worth it either, just some short-range weapons that work situationally. You think in the 8th title of the series, we'd have villains who learn from history and recruit Mavericks that are actually competent. But nope, we just had to have one of these idiots in the roster again, don't we? As it stands, X8 really tries to shine with its unique concepts, but with most of them ending up like Gigabolt, it's clear why it didn't go as far as it would have liked. Just like how Pokemon makes the Pokemon generations work, a key part in making an X game efficient is how formidable your adversaries are. Sure, it's fun to play as X, Zero, and Axel, but that's only a portion of what makes the games fun. If the stages and bosses design around them doesn't hold up, then what good is playing as cool characters? This is why it's important to highlight the Mavericks that set a good example for their jobs, and ones that serve as cautionary tales on what not to do with stage and boss designs. This also applies with Robot Masters, Mudos Reploids, and even Net Navis in some cases. So whether I'm right or not with each of my picks, I hope you can see where I'm coming from.
Yeah, you continue to ignore me. So much for a highlight of cautionary tales.
Oh come on dude, I know I've been neglecting you, but given your reputation, can you blame me?
Well, why am I still here? Just to suffer? Every day to be a punching bag?
Man, don't guilt trip me like this. Okay, tell you what, I might have something special in store for you.
Oh, really?
Yep, exactly 2 months from now, we're finally gonna make something dedicated to your game.
Phew, what a relief. And here I thought, wait, 2 months from now? But that's April 1st, you son of a—
Thank you for watching everyone. This is probably my longest video yet. I put a lot of work in this one, so I do hope you enjoyed overall. Thank you all for 1,000 subs as well. I'm so happy to make it this far. Here's to more fun projects to come. See you all then.